Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Liverpool have got their man. Alexander Isak is joining for £130 million. They've also spent over £400 million this summer. So can anyone compete with Liverpool? All right, for this one, we've got our Liverpool correspondent, James Pearce. We've also got Adam Crafton as well. James, finally, the Eagles landed. David Ornstein broke the exclusive on Sunday evening. Deal agreed for £130 million for Alexander Isak. Was this always inevitable that Liverpool were going to get their man?
I think certainly in the past few weeks, this had definitely been the kind of the direction of travel with it. I had my doubts at various points because you wondered whether Newcastle might, their Saudi owners might dig their heels in and just try and make an example out of Isak. But yeah, I think what was key was, that meeting that obviously took place between Isak and the hierarchy at Newcastle on the day of that game at St James's. I think in the aftermath of that game, the tone just seemed to change, and that was at the point, I'd say, when I was very confident we'd end up here. And then, of course, with Newcastle spending all that money on Voltamade last week, you just thought, well, they've effectively already spent a big chunk of the Isak money in advance. So, ultimately a sense of inevitability, but a real saga to get to this point.
Yeah, I'm sure for me and for various other people, Adam, who support other teams, they were hoping Newcastle might just hold on to Isak. What have you made of it all? And also, I guess, what does he say about Liverpool and their intentions moving forward for the Premier League?
Well, if you'd have said at the start of the window that Liverpool would come away with the players that they have done, and if you add to that, I mean, at the time of recording, we're still not quite sure what will happen with Mark Gay as well. So if you add all of that in together, I mean, this could be one of the most, on paper at least, probably the most spectacular single window I can ever really remember. And even, when you were thinking about that point where they signed Ekitike ahead of Newcastle, although I don't think he was ever as close to Newcastle perhaps as Newcastle thought he was, which has been a theme of the window as well. At that point, you really thought it was going to be Ekitike or Isak. And for them to come away with both of them, and also, obviously there's the tragic loss of Diogo Jota, but also to make decent money on a lot of the other players that Liverpool were looking to get out. It's been pretty remarkable, really.
Yeah, James, over £400 million spent. I mean, looking to be a Premier League record, and Adams alluded to it, some quality coming through the doors there. Big money, top players. This is not the Liverpool we're used to in this respect. How are they affording all of this?
Well, I think there's a number of factors in that. One is that, let's not forget, they've generated over £200 million from sales this summer. That's certainly a big part of it. I'd certainly say they've sold well when you look at the fees they banked for players, like Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez, Quivin Kelleher, Jarell Quansah, the list goes on. And also, it's a sign of where Liverpool are at as a club now. The fact that, for a long time, the policy was to invest in potential and to try and, it was always talked about trying to, rather than sign the big thing, the finished article, you try and spot potential and then you elevate a player to world-class bracket. You think of, the greatest signings of some of the greatest signings of the Klopp era. You think of Mohamed Salah, Roberto Firmino, Sadio Mane. They weren't beating off competition from top clubs to get to those players, but they kicked on at Liverpool. And I think the biggest change this summer is with Florian Wirtz and now with Alexander Isak, two mega deals, shattering the British transfer record. It's a massive show of ambition, and it is a sea change in terms of buying the finished article. And when you throw into the mix, buying two young, dynamic fullbacks in Frimpong and Kirkes, and of course Ekitike has been a revelation in his opening weeks at Liverpool. I think as a Liverpool fan, it's just been an absolutely unprecedented summer. And of course, in terms of how they can afford it as well, you'd have to say, the fact they've barely spent, have they, in the previous three windows? Only Chiesa last summer. Commercially, they're now an absolute juggernaut, finally realising their full potential. The Anfield redevelopment is now bringing in the rewards as well with a 61,000 seater stadium. And of course, what was it, 85 million they banked from the Champions League run and all the riches that come from winning the Premier League.
Yeah, James is absolutely right on the commercial point. I mean, Liverpool are with Adidas now, right, James?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had some conversations recently, because always you've had, say, Real Madrid are Adidas's huge brand globally, but Man United have always been their big challenger. And actually now, increasingly, I'm hearing that, within Adidas, it's like, well, Liverpool could be that challenger globally, that there is that kind of risk, particularly, with Liverpool doing even better, Man United slipping off slightly, that over time that it becomes that way. And it's, you mentioned the two young fullbacks, but even those young fullbacks, although Frimpong, there was clearly some sort of clause that they were able to access there. But Kirkes, that was a player at the top of the market in his position. It's not a kind of Andy Robertson situation where they've picked him up for a few million from Hull. This is, a Premier League proven player going for big money from Bournemouth, who have also sold incredibly well this summer. So Liverpool have really basically just spent at the top of the market, which is a really new thing, I think, for us to see. What it does do is it puts, creates a huge expectation. Play some mind games. I mean, if Liverpool don't win the league this season, you really, I mean, I think from the point they're at now at the end of this window, I mean, you'd be hugely disappointed, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how serious Salah was, James, when he said Arsenal are favourites to win it this season. But I mean, with the kind of business Liverpool have done and potentially more to come, I mean, the pressure's on to retain the Premier League.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable when you spend that amount of money. There is pressure to deliver, isn't there? But I think from a Liverpool perspective, you look at it, and I think before a ball was kicked this season, the fear was, is there been too much change? Because you kind of a year ago, we were talking about Liverpool. It was Slot had come in and a lot had changed off the pitch, but the squad had effectively stayed the same. And Slot felt that he benefited from that continuity and stability in the dressing room. Of course, this time around it's completely different, and the fear would be, and I don't think you can completely dispel it just because Liverpool have had a great start, but like that things are a bit disjointed and that you are effectively in a bit of transition, trying to bed in and gel so many new faces. But the beauty of it for Liverpool so far is, without really clicking, that they've won 3 out of 3. They've already won 2 of the most difficult Premier League games of the season. Arsenal, arguably, their biggest challenger to retaining the title, and Newcastle away. Both games they drew last season, actually en route to winning the title, and they've won both of them already. And we're talking about a team where Florian Wirtz hasn't really clicked, I'd say, yet. And you're throwing in Alexander Isak into that mix, arguably the most complete centre forward in world football. So it's a hell of a platform to build on.
Yeah, well, before we move on, there is another team who have been part of this Isak saga, and that's Newcastle United. Well, let's hear the view from Tyneside. Here is the Athletic's George Caulkin.
It's been a saga to end all sagas, but finally, as the window closes, there is some closure for Newcastle. Isak has moved. That means that Eddie Howe can get on with moulding his squad. He knows that the players he has want to be there. They will end a difficult window with far more balance and with more quality and depth. That's a good thing. It also means that attention doesn't have to be given to reintegrating Alexander Isak. Fans will not have to confront their feelings about that. It means that Howe's press conferences will not be dominated by that moving forward. These are the positives. However, we shouldn't kid ourselves here. Newcastle have lost a world-class player. Their priority this summer had been to keep Isak. The message consistently over the summer was that he was not for sale, or that he wouldn't be for sale unless anybody got close to their £150 million valuation. They've ended up selling him for significantly less to that, to a Premier League club that they ultimately want to emulate. Isak refused to play, he behaved appallingly, and he's got what he's wanted. I think that's a terrible look. What message does it send to the rest of Howe's players? If fingers are to be pointed, it should be at the ownership of the club. This is their decision. It's not Howe's decision, and it's their responsibility too that Newcastle have been forced to navigate this window without a sporting director, without a CEO. After the carnage of a year ago, that does feel like negligence. It's also very sad. Isak scored the winning goal at Wembley when Newcastle ended their 70-year wait for a domestic trophy back in March. For Newcastle fans, that was a moment of huge romance. This summer, it feels like romance has withered.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess the question is, what kind of precedents does this set for Newcastle, Adam? You know, Isak, world class, of course, and I guess there's an idea that he probably might be leaving, but what's to say Nico Waldemade becomes another great striker that they've bought, and then he goes to another top team? Is this just the situation a team like Newcastle find themselves in?
I think it's the situation every team may find themselves in at a certain point. You know, it happened to Liverpool a few years ago with Philippe Coutinho. You know, sometimes in football that happens. Newcastle, by the way, may well benefit from a situation like that if Johan Visser ends up joining the club today. You know, look at what he's been doing at Brentford for the last few weeks. So I think we have to be a bit careful, you know, with some of the kind of ethical judgments being made on Isak. I think ultimately, you know, no fan likes it when it happens to them. A lot of fans depend on it when they benefit from it. We all see it at different points. Sometimes we see it's happened, but we just don't hear about it. You know, it'll be a demand made in a meeting or things like that. And also clubs, by the way, can treat players pretty brutally as well. When, you know, look at with the bomb squads and the lofts that we hear about every summer as well. So, you know, even the term bomb squad, I think, is a horrible term. It's like, you know, these players, you know, if you take it very literally, like exploding the morale and atmosphere in a football club. So it's not very nice. Sorry, I deviated from your question. Remind me what your question was.
I mean, is it inevitable a team like Newcastle will be losing their best players, basically?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, Isak's a brilliant player, but you know, they've not lost Sandro. They've still got that amazing midfield of Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes. The other night, I was watching the Bruno Guimaraes performance against Liverpool. I can't believe no one's gone in for him. You know, if you talk about Newcastle being vulnerable, sorry, Newcastle fans, I'm not trying to sell another one of your great players.
Stop it now.
Yeah, I do think this is a particularly unique situation where Newcastle have developed a player to the point where he is basically the best striker, the best centre forward, at least, on the planet. And the reality is Newcastle are at a stage of their progression where they aren't able to win a Premier League title, and with the way that the PSR rules aren't able to make a jump in a single summer from being fourth to second and first. They're not quite able to do that. Now, you can have all kinds of discussions about that, but I don't think it's the worst outcome if you end up, and by the way, I'm going off on tangent, but the 110 million that was offered early in the summer, which was somehow framed to be an insult, was like an incredible amount of money, right? It was never an insulting offer in the first place. I think they've done really well to get 130 million. I'm not quite sure. I mean, how can anyone be worth 130 million? I think what's he got to do to pay that back from a Liverpool perspective? So for them to be able to have that, reinvest it, build the strength in their squad, I don't think is the worst thing. I think where it becomes damaging for Newcastle is the fact they've insisted all along they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, fair. I think you finally answered my question there. Appreciate it. Right, next, let's look at Liverpool and their start to the season on the pitch. Dominic Szoboszlai with a moment of magic at Anfield as Liverpool beat Arsenal. James, you were at Anfield. You saw that. What was it like close up, but also how significant was that win for Liverpool?
Sorry, I just found something. Yeah, it was sensational, wasn't it? It was a piece of individual brilliance that it felt completely out of keeping with a lot of what was an incredibly scrappy game, where at times it was hard to believe, you know, they were the two best teams in the Premier League on display, because it was far from a classic. But I think the longer the game went on, you kind of felt that, well, it's either going to be a mistake or a piece of brilliance. And, you know, thankfully for Liverpool, it was Dominic Szoboszlai delivering the latter. I mean, you know, we've seen him do it on international duty for Hungary, but never for Liverpool before. Of course, before this season, Trent Alexander-Arnold was the free kick taker. But yeah, I think he's well and truly settled who succeeded Alexander-Arnold on those duties now. I mean, I'm struggling to think of a better one I've seen. I mean, he wears the Liverpool number 8 shirt, Szoboszlai, and it was Gerrard-esque, really, because it's just impossible to think of hitting a football sweeter than that. I mean, I know there was some talk about Raya's positioning, but I just don't think any goalkeeper in the world saves that. It's like it's going away from him the whole time and goes in off the post. It was very, very special.
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking, Liverpool got Isak over Arsenal. Arsenal are now chasing Liverpool once again, and Liverpool just setting the tone to say, James, just keep your distance. You know, we know we're good. We know we're gonna try and give it our best shot. Put you in your place. Calm down, lads. We're good to go.
I mean, psychologically that felt big. I know it's still so early in the season, and so many points still to play for, but. When you think, all the talk this summer Arsenal-wise has been about, taking that next step to go from challengers to winning something significant. And, they've done some really good business, Arsenal, I think, going in that, trying to achieve that target. But yeah, I think that must have been soul destroying for them to come to Anfield to lose to a moment like that. And I do think surely Arteta will be kicking himself that they didn't show a bit more ambition going forward, because especially first half, I thought Liverpool looked vulnerable. They were there to be got at. But I don't know, I just thought Arsenal, but I thought it was a strange approach. They seem to kill the momentum of the game quite often. They seem to take an age over dead ball situations. And that was a big thing for Liverpool, the fact that they defended so much better. Because I think, there was a fear going into it that Liverpool had looked vulnerable defensively against Bournemouth and Newcastle. And we know, Arsenal are so strong from set pieces. But yeah, Konate, Van Dijk, Kirke's best performance for the club so far. Szoboszlai, aside from his free kick, I mean, I think Liverpool have to stick with him at right back. I just think he's, I know
is
they've
Conor
bought
Bradley
Frimpong.
fit? Is he good to go, Conor Bradley?
Yeah, I mean, there was a big expectation that Bradley would come back into the side because he came off the bench at Newcastle late on, which obviously allowed Szoboszlai to go into midfield. That was why he was there to produce the dummy that led to Ngumoa's goal. And of course, Bradley had another 4 weeks training under his belt going into the weekend. But I think part of it for Slot also is, how do you get as many of your best players as possible in the team? Because I think you play Szoboszlai, that means you probably leave out Wirtz, or you have to leave out probably McAllister, which he didn't want to do. So yeah, I think I think Burnley away after the international break is the start of 6 games in the space of 17 days and 3 different competitions. So there'll be all kinds of combinations, I'm sure, to come, and lots of game time to go around. But I wouldn't be moving Szoboszlai out of right back anytime soon.
What do you make of the match, Adam?
Awful. It wasn't kind of like a fascinating tactical duel or anything like that. It was just a poor game. I mean, you're waiting for something to happen, and something obviously did happen. An amazing goal. I do think some of what's been said about Arsenal subsequent to the game could very easily have been said about Liverpool as well. I thought, if you just, it's very easy to say like Arsenal should have gone more adventurous, right? But bear in mind, they lose Saliba after a few minutes. Saka obviously didn't play. Odegaard only comes on in the last 20 minutes. Eza's kind of there but not there because he's just arrived. I don't think this was an easy game for Arsenal to go into, and I didn't really see. People were saying sort of Liverpool took more risks. I didn't think they did in the game. The first half, Liverpool had the fewest number of shots as they'd had at Anfield, I think, for almost 4 years. Mo Salah didn't have a shot until after the 70th minute, and that was 0.04 XG shot that was easily blocked. Thank you to Opta. So I don't really see this. And Arsenal also had the higher XG. I mean, it was really low XG, something like 0.55 to 0.45. So I'm not making out Arsenal were hugely ambitious or really went through it. And I get that there's this onus on it, but I also just don't really buy this idea that Arsenal, are doing something hugely wrong in these games against big six teams. They have this amazing record going back a few years. So it was something like 23, 24 games until yesterday that they hadn't lost one of these games, and they've won quite a lot of them. Just don't win that many away from home. But most big six teams don't win that many games against top sides away from home. I think Arsenal's bigger problem, I would worry far more about Arsenal's performance at Old Trafford against a much poorer team in Man United than Liverpool than I would have yesterday. Personally, to me, it was a game that either side could have lost, probably deserved to be a draw. I don't think either side really deserved to win it, but obviously, a freakishly good goal has settled it.
Yeah, you talk about the Manchester United game, Adam. What is it you're worried about? Is it the creation of chances? Is it the style of play?
Not worried about it in the sense of it was
Keeps
an
you up at
opening
night.
day. Yeah. I'm not waking up at night worrying about Arsenal. Got enough with United. But I think with Arsenal, I thought in that game they had way too many chances against them, and they looked far too open. He's just got to find a balance, in some of these games. But ultimately, it's not going to be a game at Liverpool. That was Arsenal's hardest fixture of the season, right? And they went there. They could have drawn, could have won, could have lost. It happens. What you want to see from Arsenal is just, I think, more authority in those games against. And I don't mean this as a dig at Man United, against mid to upper table teams. They've got to have more authority and risk in those games. They can't have repeats of some of the points they dropped in those games last season. I think Arsenal fans know that, and I don't think there should be any great panic based on yesterday. I think where it does become a bit worrying, if you're a fan of a kind of a rival team, is Liverpool have had 3 games this season, all of which they could have dropped points in. The Bournemouth one was pretty ropey. The Newcastle one obviously took a crazy moment in the last minute, and then you've got a freakishly good goal on Sunday. Now, one side of that is it's the hallmark of champions to go and win games in those circumstances, and that can be quite intimidating for rivals. I think the flip side, for Liverpool fans, is you're probably looking at that and thinking either we've got a huge amount to improve, or there's something not quite yet right in the fluidity. So there's 2 sides to see that.
Yeah, James, Liverpool still 100% to the start of the Premier League season. Actually very similar to last season. I think they won the first 3 as well, which is brilliant. What does he say about Slot's adaptability to how, I guess, he's managed such a transition this summer?
Yeah, I think what's helped is the fact that without a major tournament, it was the first proper pre-season he's had with the squad, and although obviously there's been this dramatic end to the window, they did also get a fair bit of their business done early. So I think that has helped to a degree. I just think it's exciting, isn't it? I think someone like Florian Wirtz, he's I think clearly he's needing some time to adapt to the pace and physicality of the Premier League. It was interesting listening to Slot talk after the game on Sunday, where he said, he described it as like a welcome to the Premier League. He said, he went off with cramp in places he didn't even know he could get cramp. But it's like, well, what a position to be in that is, where you're talking about the gem of German football, really, who's we've not really seen him anything like how we know he can influence a game. But he should be. I've got no doubt that he will kick on after the international break, and I think it was a bit chaotic, the first 2 wins, which I think there's probably an element of inevitability to that when you've got so many new faces. But Sunday was different, and I agree with Adam that it could easily, we could easily have been sat here today talking about a 1-0 Arsenal win, and and would Liverpool have regretted not going for it to a greater extent? Although I do think, although it may be not reflected in the shot count or the XG, I thought second half Liverpool were the team on the front foot more. But then of course you'd expect that with the fans behind them as well. So yeah, there, it's I'd say it's beyond expectations. I think also it would be wrong not to mention that this is a group of players still dealing with, an unbelievable amount of grief, having lost, a much-loved friend and teammate in Diogo Jota. That was the big unknown going into this season. How on earth do you move forward and get back to playing football again? And it wasn't that long ago that there were those incredibly poignant scenes at Preston when the first time they'd step back onto a pitch again. So I think you have to frame it in that context and think, wow, imagine thinking that Liverpool would be where they are now. I don't think anyone could have Liverpool-wise could have asked for anything more than what they've seen so far.
Yeah, Adam, you've spoken to Arne Slot, especially when he was at Feyenoord, and something he spoke about was about being able to manage change in personnel. What do you remember of that interaction?
What I do remember is I think between his first and second summer, when he was at Feyenoord, there was a huge amount of change. And I know, having spoken to some very senior people at Liverpool, actually probably a couple of months out from the end of last season, they were saying one of their reasons actually for hiring Slot was having seen his ability to handle change and knowing that there was two big aspects of change that were coming at Liverpool. First of all, Klopp leaving. So you've got this change of a legendary manager, very, really the face of the club. And it's interesting, like no one really mentions Jurgen Klopp anymore, do they? Like we don't really mention him or think about him that much, which shows the job that Slot has done. And then secondly, the churn of players that Liverpool knew that they were going to have to do over the sort of, well, it all seems to have happened in one summer, but clearly over time. So that was something that definitely appeals to the Liverpool hierarchy about Slot. He's clearly not afraid of that. But it's not easy, it's not easy to lose 6 or 7 players and bring in 6 or 7 players and keep and have expectations really, really high and to defend a Premier League title at that level. And also to lose, I've said this a couple of times the last few weeks, I still think it's like kind of underpriced how big a player Trent Alexander-Arnold was for Liverpool. I know some fans now just like to remember that sometimes he wouldn't defend very well, but he was an unbelievable creative player, and the way that Liverpool kept the ball and comprised attacks and got the best out of Salah and all of that sort of stuff. And then also I think bringing Pearce in is very different to what we've seen before from Liverpool. He feels, if I think of Liverpool under Klopp and even Slot to an extent last season, I still think they were at their best when they were a bit more direct. And Pearce is a lot more, I said a few weeks ago, he feels very Manchester City to me. Feels like a Manchester City player in a Liverpool team, trying to kind of adapt Liverpool slightly and the pace of the game. So I'm really interested to see how Slot develops that. But 9 points out of 9, you can't really argue with it.
Yeah, it's true. And also, James, back to what Adam's saying about Slot is that the style in which he's done it in is very different to Jurgen Klopp. Some might say understated, even in his post-match reports or post-match interviews. He's always semi-balanced. He spoke about the game yesterday and he was just very much like, either team could have won it. You take this several times and we might get a very similar result. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's let the football fundamentally do the talking.
Yeah, I think one of his great qualities is authenticity. I think from the moment he's come into Liverpool, he's very, very comfortable in his own skin. I think he is very calm and composed. That's why I think when he lost his rag at Goodison back in I think it was February time last season, it was like, oh wow, he's human. Yeah. He's like it took a 98th minute equaliser in controversial fashion in the last ever Merseyside derby to push him over the edge. But he is just very, very balanced. And picking up on what Adam said, I asked him on the tour actually over in Japan, I said to him, are you not concerned there's too much change? And he said, you're messing, aren't you? He said, I lost 14 players at Feyenoord one summer. He said, this is nothing compared to that. And he obviously pointed to the fact that the goalkeeper's the same, the 2 centre halves are the same, essentially the kind of the basis of the midfield's the same with Gravenberch and McAllister, and of course Gakpo and Salah still key components of that attack. So yeah, it's, I think, this is like the evolution of Liverpool under Slot now, isn't it? I think, the first 12 months surpassed all expectations with what he did with the group he inherited. But it was clear, I think, even last season, you looked at it and you thought, yeah, change is on the horizon. It is going to need a refresh. It's just that I don't think anyone thought it would be quite so expensive and quite so extensive.
Yeah, I mean, how does he manage it all? And also, Ekitike with Isak coming in. What happens with that conversation as well, James?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely dilemma to have, isn't it? I think Slot was
not for
actually
Ekitike. He must be there going, "Oh man."
Yeah, but I mean, let's not forget when Liverpool's, there was all this talk when their last season of, could they pull off the treble, and then they looked absolutely knackered come that pivotal period in March where they go out the Champions League to PSG. And then lose the Carabao Cup final to Newcastle, when fatigue definitely played a part. And Slot spoke at the end of the season, actually, when I did a sit down with him at the AXA training centre. He said then that if he had any regrets, one would be that he hadn't rotated more, that he had maybe overworked a core of like 13, 14 players, and that he was desperate to go further in the Champions League, and that, yeah, they've been unfortunate to draw PSG in the last 16 like they did, but if they'd only had a bit more in the tank, then, they got past PSG that night, they probably wouldn't have been stopped, would they, en route to potentially a 7th European Cup. So I think that's part of it for him. And also, he's also talked about how he felt Liverpool were involved in far too many tight games last season. He thinks that they need to be more expansive. They want to take more risks. They want to create more and score more. And at times, if that means being a little bit more open, then so be it. So, and he's also talked about Ekitike being able to play off the left. He's also talked about potentially playing 2 up front. So, I think Liverpool end up playing 60 odd games this season. So I don't really worry about how he's going to keep people happy, because I think there'll be more than enough football to go round.
Yeah, I'm not getting my big wooden spoon out here, but I do think it's going to be really interesting, because he might ask one of them to play from the left in some games. To me, Ekitike just looks like a 9. He doesn't look to me like a player that's going to be running back in the way that Gakpo has very diligently, to be fair, in the last few games. If you play with 2 up front, does that mean Mo Salah's like a conventional winger? Do you play Mo Salah as I don't really see how that would necessarily work. Equally, like Salah probably, we always say this, but can't play every game, can he? And he's also, will he have AFCON as well?
Yeah, he will.
Salah,
yeah.
For a few weeks around Christmas time. So I guess those are things to weigh in. Also, Isak, he's had injury issues. I think that's something that people forget as well. So he may need a bit of protecting at certain times. But there will come a point where, if Isak keeps getting the nod in the games that players want to play in, the Merseyside derby, Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal, big Champions League games, that's going to be a really tricky one to manage, because there'll be a point at which someone turns around and says, I'm not playing in the games I want to play in, and I'm a really expensive signing, and I've proven myself, by the way, in those big games already. So I do think that's going to be a test for Slot, but it's quite a nice one, isn't it?
No, it totally is. And, there's a lot of people listening to this, watching this, quite jealous of
Poor
Liverpool's
Arne
transfer.
Slot.
Poor Arne Slot, eh?
Yeah.
And it's still probably got one more to come, if not more. Anyway, let's leave it there, because I want to finish on this one. It's time for the final whistle, Adam. You have 1 minute before we wrap things up to tell us something from the past week that tickled your fancy from the world of football. I'm actually going to get my timer out, because I keep forgetting each time to do it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, off you go. 3, 2, 1.
I'm going to go with all of us, with pundits, with journalists, because this Premier League season is just completely wild, isn't it? First weekend of the season, Manchester City are back. Second week of the season, Tottenham have sorted themselves out, haven't they? And then here we are 3 weeks into the season. City have lost 2 games. Spurs have got turned over by Bournemouth. West Ham are absolutely useless, but by the way, they've just won at Nottingham Forest. Bournemouth have sold all their players, but they've just almost did a job at Anfield and won at Spurs. Who else? Man United were on the brink. Now they're not on the brink because they've won a game and signing a goalkeeper. Who else? Chelsea, could they cope with the Club World Cup stuff? Well, they've started the season pretty well. Crystal Palace might not be very good without Eze, but then they win 3-0 at Villa. So, yeah, all of us and all our narratives that we keep coming up with to make podcasts like this.
Not bad. That's pretty good, that. Yeah. Did you mention Aston Villa?
Oh, wait, no, I forgot Villa.
But that's the one I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, but Villa I think they've not really signed anyone, have they? Well, they might. I mean, I've just heard today, and let's see if this happens by the time this goes out, but what Villa are putting towards Jadon Sancho's extraordinary wages at Manchester United, to me screams a little bit of panic may have enveloped at Villa Park last night, because Sancho's wages are pretty hefty at Man United, and it sounds like they're paying 80% of those plus a loan fee. So that is pretty striking.
Do you know what? I'll let you have that because that's bonus insight. Brilliant stuff. Let's leave it there, gents. Thanks so much for your time. James, Adam, really appreciate your time. And also thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and also subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. We're back soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.